Imagine going to bed tonight. No mattress, no pillow, no blanket, no bedroom. Instead, you lie down on cold ground inside a dark cave with nothing but a few leaves, animal skins, or whatever soft material you could find. And somehow, you have to sleep. For most of us, that sounds almost impossible. But for ancient humans, sleeping without a modern bed wasn't unusual. It was normal. So how did they actually do it? Did they simply sleep on bare rock? Did they sleep inside caves? And perhaps most surprisingly, when did humans first start creating something that actually looked like a bed? The answer tells us something fascinating about how our ancestors survived the night. The problem with sleeping on the ground isn't exactly designed for sleeping. It's hard, it's cold, it can be wet, and outdoors there are insects, predators, wind, rain, and other dangers. So if ancient humans simply dropped onto the ground every night, they would have faced a serious problem. But there's an important detail we often forget. Ancient humans didn't have to sleep exactly where they were standing. They could change their sleeping environment, and they did. Instead of bringing a bed with them, they could bring the materials needed to make the ground more comfortable: leaves, grass, bark, reeds, animal hides, and sometimes layers of different materials. In other words, the first beds may not have been objects. They may have been prepared places to sleep. Sleeping on soft materials. Think about lying directly on hard ground. Now imagine putting a thick layer of dry grass underneath you. Immediately, the situation changes. The material creates a softer surface. It can also provide some insulation between the body and the cold ground. And that matters because the ground can draw heat away from the body. So a layer of plant material wasn't just about comfort. It could have been a survival tool. Archaeologists have discovered evidence of ancient sleeping surfaces made from plant materials. One remarkable example comes from Border Cave in South Africa, where researchers found ancient bedding made from grasses and other plant material. Some of this evidence dates back hundreds of thousands of years, and that's important because it suggests that humans were modifying their sleeping environment long before modern beds existed. They weren't simply accepting whatever the ground gave them. They were engineering their sleeping space. But what about cold nights? Now comes the bigger problem. Imagine sleeping outdoors during a freezing night. A soft layer isn't enough. You also need warmth. This is where shelter becomes extremely important. Ancient humans could use caves, rock shelters, temporary structures, and other protected locations. A shelter can reduce exposure to wind and rain, and fire can provide heat and light. But there is another clever advantage. A group of people sleeping together can potentially share warmth. Humans are highly social animals. Our ancestors didn't necessarily spend every night alone. Groups could create safer sleeping environments by staying together in protected places. So surviving the night wasn't about finding the perfect mattress. It was about controlling the environment as much as possible. Shelter, fire, insulation, and other people. Together, these could make a huge difference. Did they sleep in caves? Caves are often shown as the typical ancient human bedroom. And yes, caves and rock shelters were certainly used by humans. But there's a catch. Not every ancient human lived in a cave, and caves weren't necessarily permanent homes. Humans occupied many different environments. They lived in open landscapes, forests, coastal regions, grasslands, and other habitats. That meant sleeping arrangements had to be flexible. If you were traveling with a group, carrying a giant wooden bed would obviously be ridiculous. But carrying or collecting grass, leaves, hides, or other lightweight materials, that's much easier. This is one reason why ancient sleeping technology was probably closely connected to mobility. The sleeping surface could be created wherever people stopped. The surprising part, they may have cleaned their beds. Here's something you probably wouldn't expect. Ancient sleeping areas weren't necessarily just random piles of plants. Researchers have found evidence suggesting that some ancient humans deliberately maintained their sleeping spaces. At Border Cave, for example, archaeological evidence has been interpreted as showing repeated use and replacement of plant bedding. Some bedding layers also show evidence associated with burning. One possible reason is hygiene. Old plant material can accumulate insects and other unwanted organisms. Replacing or burning bedding could have helped control them, so the basic idea may have been surprisingly familiar. Old bedding gets dirty. Remove it. Replace it with fresh material. That's not a modern invention. The materials were primitive, but the problem was exactly the same. What did they use as a pillow? Now imagine trying to sleep without a pillow. What would you put under your head? There probably wasn't one universal answer. Depending on the environment, people could use folded hides. hides, bundles of vegetation, soft plant material, or other natural objects. But here's an important distinction. We shouldn't imagine ancient humans constantly searching for something shaped exactly like a modern pillow. Their sleeping arrangements were adapted to whatever materials were available. In some environments, soft vegetation might be abundant. In others, animal skins could be useful. And sometimes the most important goal may simply have been keeping the body insulated from the ground. Ancient humans didn't need to recreate a modern bedroom. They only needed a sleeping environment that was good enough to survive the night. Did they sleep like we do? Here's where things become much more interesting. Ancient humans needed sleep for the same basic biological reasons we do. The brain and body require periods of rest, but their sleep environment was dramatically different. There was no electricity, no alarm clock, no artificial bedroom lighting, and in many environments, darkness arrived naturally with sunset. Fire could change this. It provided light and warmth after dark. But nighttime also brought risks, predators, extreme weather, other groups, and simply being unable to see what was happening around you. So sleeping may have involved a balance between rest and environmental awareness. We have to be careful here, though. We cannot know exactly how every ancient human slept. Different populations lived in different environments and had different cultures, so there probably wasn't one single ancient sleep schedule. Instead, there were many solutions to the same basic problem. How do you safely rest until morning? The first bed wasn't really a bed. This changes how we should think about the history of beds. A bed doesn't have to be a wooden frame with a mattress. At its most basic level, a bed is simply a deliberately prepared place for sleeping, and humans appear to have been doing this for a very long time. First came natural materials: grass, leaves, reeds, hides. Then, over thousands of years, humans became better at modifying their environment. Eventually came raised sleeping platforms, more structured bedding, wooden frames, mattresses, and eventually the enormous variety of beds we have today. The technology changed dramatically, but the underlying goal stayed remarkably consistent: make sleeping safer, make it warmer, make it more comfortable, and perhaps make it cleaner. What this tells us about ancient humans. The most interesting part of this story isn't really the bed. It's what the bed tells us about ancient humans. We often imagine prehistoric people as simply reacting to nature. Cold, they find fire. Hungry, they find food. Tired, they lie down. But archaeology tells a more complicated story. Ancient humans could modify their surroundings. They selected materials. They organized spaces. They created shelter. They controlled fire. And they repeatedly improved their chances of surviving difficult environments. That means something as ordinary as sleeping can reveal a surprisingly advanced behavior. Because sleep makes you vulnerable. For several hours, you can't actively search for food. You can't easily respond to danger. You can't keep moving. So creating a safe sleeping environment may have been one of the most important survival problems our ancestors ever solved. Payoff. So the next time you climb into a soft bed, remember how strange that object really is. A mattress represents thousands of years of human experimentation, but the basic idea is incredibly old. Long before bedrooms, before pillows, before mattresses, before wooden bed frames, humans were already doing something remarkably clever. They were looking at the environment around them and asking, how can I make this place better for sleeping? Sometimes the answer was grass, sometimes leaves, sometimes animal hides, sometimes a cave, sometimes fire, and sometimes just a carefully prepared patch of ground. The ancient human bedroom may have looked nothing like ours, but the goal was exactly the same: survive the night and wake up tomorrow.